family of a Harrisonville woman murdered 5 years ago by a retired Grandview police officer.
Oklahoma City police officer Daniel Holtzclaw reacting to his conviction. This is back in 2015.
The defendant is guilty of the crime of sexual battery, and punishment is set at 8 years.
You would agree that a jumpsuit is generally regarded as a female outfit, but it looks like the prison walls don't respect that. Worse still, if the boys in blue, the mini superheroes have to trade in their capes for a jumpsuit.
I'm trying to, turn my memory back,
You best believe they had some really shady acts committed to get there. In this video, we'll look at 13 cops gone crazy after getting life sentences. Number 13, Rogerson. Australia's most corrupt cop, Rogerson, who considered himself the Invisible Hawk, believed he could get away with any crime because he wore a uniform. Fortunately enough, luck ran out for him when he was arrested and jailed for his hideous crimes in 1999. Rogerson was convicted of perverting the course of justice and lying to the Police Integrity Commission. He is known to affiliate with top crime figures like the New South Wales detectives, including Ray Gunners Kelly and Fred Cray, and with a number of organized crime figures including Abe Saffron, Arthur Nettie Smith, and Christopher Dale Flannery. Nettie Smith, who was a convicted heroin dealer, defiler, and armed robber, claimed Rogerson gave him the green light to commit crimes in New South Wales, while Flannery specialized in contract killing. The unfortunate victim, a 20-year-old student and wannabe drug dealer James Boag, got himself into shady business with Rogerson and his cohorts. He was shot dead with 2 bullets to his chest and his body was thrown into a river. May 2014. Rogerson was remanded in prison after being charged, along with fellow former New South Wales detective Glenn McNamara, with the murder of 20-year-old student Jamie Gow. Both pleaded not guilty on January 2015. Their trial, which started in July 2015, was aborted after 2 days because of the potential prejudice caused after McNamara's then barrister Charles Waterstreet made a reference to Rogerson killing 2 or 3 people when he was in the police force. Following a retrial, both Rogerson and McNamara were found guilty of murder. On September 2016, both were sentenced to life for the murder of Gow. The one-time award-winning Outstanding Policeman of the Year, Rogerson, once said the people he shot never ended up in hospital. They went straight to the morgue. This sounds like he was not remorseful of his evil acts. Number 12, Joe Ferrari. Arguably one of the greatest thieves that ever wore a uniform, there's word around that Joe Ferrari is in fact not his actual name. Yes, Thitason Uthanaphon was nicknamed Joe Ferrari for his many luxury cars. The Anti-National Corruption Commission revealed that Joe Ferrari had assets worth 1.3 billion baht. Last time it was checked, public servants don't earn that much, but Joe Ferrari seems to be the exception. One would think his strange wealth would be the reason for his arrest. But the flashy cop was jailed for life for torturing a drug suspect to death during a brutal interrogation. Leaked viral footage showed Thitason and 6 other officers wrapping 7 plastic bags around 24-year-old Jirapong Thanapat's head. They did this while questioning him and trying to extort $60,000, which eventually led to him dying due to suffocation. The local Thai media said that Thitason ordered his men to take the body to the hospital and tell the doctor the death was caused by a drug overdose. After his arrest, the police officer in the court confessed to all charges except murder by torture. He said he did not intend to kill him. He only wanted information so he could destroy the drug business. Judge at Bangkok's Central Criminal Bangkok Court found Thitason Uthanaphon guilty of murder by torture in a case that caused public outrage and shone a rare light on police brutality and corruption in the kingdom. The Court for Corruption and Misconduct cases sentenced the 41-year-old to death, but immediately commuted it to life imprisonment. 5 of the other 6 officers involved in the case were found guilty of murder and also received life sentences. A 7th got 5 years and 4 months following his testimony. However, the court reduced Thitason's sentence to life imprisonment because he had attempted to revive the suspect and had paid for the funeral expenses for the family. Number 11, Joseph Miedzianowski. If you think the other cops were corrupt and a great harm to society, wait till you hear of Joseph Miedzianowski. During his 22-year police career, he received 59 citations for valor and arrests, and was publicly praised for his high number of drug and illegal weapon busts. Unknown to everyone, he was the chief of drug dealers. Joseph Miedzianowski is a former Chicago police officer who was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for racketeering and drug conspiracy. He is known as Chicago's most corrupt cop for his part in a cocaine sales ring with gang members and other corrupt police officers. During this time, he was also secretly revealing the identity of undercover police officers to gang members, protecting drug organizations, distributing crack cocaine, and supplying gang members with ammunition. This is a clear definition of your enemies being closer than you think. Miedzianowski's conviction led to the breakup of the department's gang crimes unit. In 2020, Miedzianowski requested a reduction in his sentence under the First Step Act. This request was denied. In 2022, brothers Juan and Rosendo Hernandez had their murder convictions thrown out after requesting a retrial, based on claims that a detective named Ronaldo Guevara had framed them at the request of Miedzianowski. Joseph Miedzianowski is serving a life sentence for leading a criminal conspiracy while he was supposed to be protecting the lives and properties of citizens. 2 decades after his conviction, he moved the district court for a sentence reduction under Section 404B of the First Step Act. He asserted that a reduction was justified by his post-sentencing conduct, his advanced age, and what he says are unwarranted disparities between his sentence and the sentences of similarly situated defendants. The district court, however, found that the defendant is legally eligible for relief, but exercised its discretion to deny a reduction based on the seriousness of his crimes. Miedzianowski's direct role in the drug and gang activity impacted the health and safety of his community, including innocent citizens both across the city and across the country. The fact that Miedzianowski was a police officer who swore to uphold laws and protect his community, only to trade upon the respectability such a position affords to further commit crimes, only heightens the brazenness of his offense. Not to mention, even after he was caught, he engaged in perjury and threats toward witnesses who testified against him. Miedzianowski was no ordinary drug criminal. On appeal, the defendant argued that the court erred by failing to address several of his arguments and by not giving enough weight to his arguments in mitigation. Number 10. Jeffrey Morland. Jeffrey Morland's story is an unusual one. The police officer who retired on June 2005 couldn't wait to drop the uniform and jump straight into crime. Jeffrey, who was already serving life without parole for the murder of a woman who was assaulted, shot in the head and left in a bathtub at her home. A few years later, investigators were able to trace his DNA to that of the killer. There was an established link between the two women, but there was no evidence to back it up. Not until Whitney's daughter had an earth-shattering revelation 7 months after the murder. While driving down the highway past the billboard with the police sketch of her mother's killer on it, she immediately recognized the killer as her mother's ex-lover. The two had dated for 3 years after meeting in a criminal justice class and broke up in 1987. He had gone on to become a police officer. He was as charming and funny as one can possibly be. I fell totally in love with him. My mother always said I should have married him, Huser described. She went to the police with her suspicions. They discovered Morland had a black Jeep and lived in the same small town as Roberts. When confronted by investigators and asked to supply a DNA sample, Morland became cagey, continually putting them off. However, they got their chance to obtain his DNA after a woman accused Morland of attacking and abusing her. The victim managed to escape his home and bring authorities there. Morland attempted suicide afterwards but survived. After handing over a DNA sample, investigators discovered it matched the DNA found at the Whitney and Roberts crime scenes. Morland told her he would sometimes patrol her mother's street to make sure she was safe. Morland was ultimately charged with 2 counts of murder and for the assault. He was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. Number 9. Derek Chauvin. Sad to see those who took the oath of risking their lives to protect those of the citizens are the threats to life of the people they are meant to protect. Derek Chauvin tops this list. The 50-year-old ex-officer was sentenced to 21 years in prison for the murder of 46-year-old George Fleod, an African-American man in Minneapolis, Minnesota. On May 25, 2020, Chauvin knelt on Floyd's neck for about 9 minutes, while Floyd was handcuffed and lying face down on the street, screaming for help, during an arrest made with 3 other officers. The Minneapolis Police Department on May 26 dismissed Chauvin, and he was arrested on May 29. The murder set off a series of protests in the Twin Cities and across the rest of the United States, later spreading around the world. On March 8, 2021, Chauvin was put on trial for unintentional second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter of Floyd before a jury in the Minnesota 4th Judicial District Court. On April 20, he was convicted of the charges. On June 25, he was sentenced to 22 years and 6 months in prison. In December 2021, Chauvin pleaded guilty to federal charges of violating Floyd's civil rights by using unreasonable force and ignoring Floyd's serious medical needs. On July 7, 2017, Chauvin was sentenced to 21 years in prison for violating Floyd's civil rights. The Minnesota Department of Corrections lists Chauvin's anticipated release date on the state's sentence as December 10, 2035. For the federal charges, Chauvin will likely be released from prison in the year 2038. Number 8. Gabriel Isasi, Fabian Lopez, and Juan Jose Nieva. How 3 policemen joined forces to kill a young innocent man is a baffling issue that will stay in the mind of many Argentines for a long time. 3 police officers in Argentina were sentenced to life in prison Tuesday for the racially motivated killing of 17-year-old Lucas Gonzalez, and 6 others received sentences of 4 to 8 years for covering up the crime. Lucas and his friends after soccer training stopped to get juice, but they ended up being assaulted because they were Morocco's, which means they had brown skin and came from a deprived neighborhood. But they went out to train. They saw them, they waited for them, they tortured them. The father of the victim narrated that his son was discriminated against because he was brown. His body was burnt with a cigarette and was shot in the head. In their defense, the police had claimed there had been a confrontation with the youths, but it was found during the trial that police had planted a toy gun in their car, sparking an argument which led to the open fire. Number 7. Len Davis. Sometimes luck runs out for even the smartest criminal. Len Davis, a former Orleans police officer known as RoboCop, definitely ran out of luck when he was sentenced to death in federal court on federal criminal civil rights charges for ordering Groves' slaying. And on December 18, 1996, Davis was sentenced to life plus 5 years in federal court for his involvement in the cocaine ring. Along with Davis, a half-dozen other former New Orleans police officers were convicted on drug trafficking charges, all stemming from the same FBI sting operation. According to a partial list of complaints and disciplinary action against Davis, obtained by an attorney, he was the subject of at least 20 complaints between 1987 and 1992, most involving brutality and physical intimidation. But in one case, he was suspended for 51 days for hitting a woman in the head with his flashlight. One officer told a reporter, "He's got an internal affairs jacket as thick as a telephone book, but supervisors have swept his dirt under the rug for so long that it's coming back to haunt them." Lenz, who has used violence and corruption to become rich, ordering hits to be carried out, finally had a taste of the dish he serves. Number 6. Arthur Sease. Arthur Sease IV, a former Memphis Police Department officer, was sentenced to a prison term of life plus 255 years by Chief Judge John P. McCalla in Memphis 10. A jury convicted Sease in February 2009 of 44 counts of civil rights, narcotics, robbery, and firearms offenses. His sentence was quite unusual and the longest ever imposed on a civil rights violation, which did not involve a victim's death. The sentence serves as a warning that even those in the corridors of power are not exempted from the law. The evidence at trial showed that from November 2003 through April 2006, Sease conspired with other members of the Memphis Police Department to use their authority as law enforcement officers to rob suspected drug dealers of cash, cocaine, and marijuana. Sease and his co-conspirators would then resell the stolen drugs for their own profit. The government proved that Sease committed or was involved in 15 separate robberies. The sentence left the whole of Memphis in shock, especially the police force. Now it's time for today's subscriber pick. Filled with rage and anger with a gun in his hand, most probably pointed to his next victim, this cop seemed to be having a hard time accepting the sentence he just received, but this is the exact way, and if not worse, that their victims felt while being assaulted and brutally killed with no sense of empathy from the assaulters. What do you think? Did he get what he deserved, or was the sentence too extreme? Drop your comment below. Number 5. Carl Walden. The 4th of July will always remain a black day for the family of Sammy Safar. Carl Walden, a former law enforcement officer for the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, was convicted and sentenced to life in prison for his involvement in a crime spree that culminated in the robbery and murder of convenience store owner Sammy Safar. Following the trial, the jury found Walden guilty of more than a dozen crimes, including obstruction of justice by murder. Walden was also convicted of taking drugs from drug dealers, trying to cover up his involvement by lying to a federal grand jury, and trying to intimidate a witness. He was found innocent of possession of cocaine with intent to distribute. However, witnesses testified that Walden used his patrol car to stop Safar on the pretext that Safar was wanted on a warrant. The plan was to put the handcuffed Safar into the back of the patrol car and leave the bag containing the money in Safar's car, so that others in the conspiracy could come and steal it. But Safar, who thought police were involved in an earlier robbery of his nephew, insisted on taking the cash with him. Moments later, Walden called a friend, Kenneth McLaughlin, on his cell phone. He told McLaughlin his identity had been compromised and he needed to take out the victim. He then drove to a deserted parking lot and choked Safar with a rope, witnesses said. McLaughlin dumped Safar's body into a thicket, where it was found the next day. McLaughlin was sentenced to 19 years and 7 months in prison on his pleas of guilty to conspiracy in the death of Safar and other crimes. Being the sole preparator of the crime, the court sentenced Walden to concurrent terms of life in prison for conspiracy to violate civil rights, depriving a person of civil rights counts and obstruction of justice by murder count. Walden was justly sentenced to life in prison for a crime spree that culminated in him murdering an innocent man. Walden appealed for a reduction of the sentence, stating that he suffered from including sleep apnea, shortness of breath, hypertension, chronic periodontitis, obesity, oral mucositis, lesions of the oral mucosa, and severe damage to his right knee, which allegedly increased his risk of death or serious illness from COVID-19. After carefully considering Carl's appeal, the court found that neither qualifies as an extraordinary and compelling reason for a sentence reduction. Number 4. David Carrick. David Carrick is a former police officer in England who used his position of authority to engage in illicit affairs with women. Carrick was arrested in 2021 and in 2022 pleaded guilty to multiple counts of rape between 2002 and 2021. In 2023, he was sentenced to life imprisonment. David Carrick, who believed his position as a Metropolitan Police officer made him untouchable as he raped, assaulted, and inflicted irretrievable destruction on at least 12 women before intimidating them into silence. However, he was eventually jailed for life. He bragged constantly to his victims that he was the law and could get away with anything he did, unknown. To him, he was gathering more enemies than he could withstand. More than 10 people have come forward to make allegations about offenses and to give police information. Some who have made allegations of further assaults may not wish to go to trial and merely want police to be aware of their alleged ordeal. Others have told the police they wish to support a criminal investigation and potential new trial. During the sentencing hearing, it emerged that Carrick tried to kill himself while on remand in prison, with the judge saying this was a self-pitying reaction to the shame he felt from the court proceedings against him. The defendant's lawyer narrated the childhood trauma David experienced. He grew up with parents who drank to excess, and he had told of being abused by his stepfather. However, these are not reasoning enough to assault and harass the lives of innocent people. Number 3. Daniel Holtzclaw. Daniel is a former police officer in the United States. He was convicted in December 2015 of multiple counts of physical assaults and forcible oral sodomy while working for the Oklahoma City Police Department. Holtzclaw was accused of assaulting 12 black women and a then 17-year-old black girl between December 2013 and June 2014 while a police officer on duty and off. Jurors in December 2015 convicted him of offenses involving 8 victims. The settlements were reached after the appeals court ordered mediation. The Oklahoma City Council agreed to the payments on January 31 without admitting liability. An Oklahoma City federal judge signed off on the settlements Tuesday. Holtzclaw denied any wrongdoing in the 2013 incidents, where he handcuffed a woman while checking on a report of a stolen car. The woman, who was not involved in the car theft, said he slammed her face into a brick wall. She said she got medical treatment at a hospital emergency room after he let her go. According to the police investigators, Holtzclaw abused his position as an officer by running background checks to find information that could be used to coerce victims into unlawful acts. On December 10, 2015, he was convicted on 18 of 36 charges, and on January 21, 2016, he was sentenced to 263 years in prison. Despite the charges Daniel received, his family still believes his innocence and has taken up the case for his release. Daniel's sister, Jenny Holtzclaw, claims Holtzclaw was railroaded by the Oklahoma City Police Department, and the recent settlements are an injustice against taxpayers and Daniel. Oklahoma City and its police department should be held accountable for encouraging and soliciting the accuser's wrongful allegations against Daniel. This has led to the conviction of an innocent officer and the wasted taxpayer dollars that the city is now using to pay the costs and attorney fees of women who were not assaulted by Daniel. In 2021, Holtzclaw's family and team of supporters released video footage of 2 victims, claiming the footage refutes their testimonies. In September 2022, a federal civil lawsuit filed against Holtzclaw was dropped, with the plaintiffs voluntarily dismissing and agreeing to never file the same claims against him. 4 other plaintiffs dismissed their lawsuits against Holtzclaw on August 2022. Jenny Holtzclaw insists she will never stop fighting for Daniel because he is innocent. Number 2. Stephanie Lazarus. Jealousy, they say, is a slow killer. This was the truth when it came to Stephanie Lazarus, who hid her tracks so well that it took almost 30 years before the truth got to light. Stephanie Eileen Lazarus is a former policewoman who murdered her ex-boyfriend's new bride, Sherry Rasmussen. The murder was a cold case until 2009. In 1917-8, Lazarus was a University of California, Los Angeles freshman at 18 years old. There, she met John Ruetten, a fitness fanatic at a party. They both were heavily focused on working out and physical fitness. Soon, they were friends with benefits. The open relationship continued after graduation. Lazarus applied for the police academy, surprising her friends and family. Ruetten got a career as an electrical engineer. In the 1980s, John Ruetten met another woman, 27-year-old Sherry Rasmussen. They instantly fell in love and were engaged for a year. But Lazarus still had feelings for Ruetten, evidenced by her journal. She did not take the engagement well. She called him over and begged him not to marry Rasmussen, revealing that she loved him. Sadly, the relationship couldn't work out and they moved, or so Ruetten thought. Ruetten found his new wife beaten to death and shot numerous times with a .38 caliber revolver. The crime was initially deemed to be a robbery gone awry, as Rasmussen's BMW was stolen. The initial suspects were 2 Latino men who were believed to have committed other burglaries in Rasmussen's neighborhood. 23 years after the murder of Sherry Rasmussen, the case was still unsolved. On February 2009, however, a cold case detective squad decided to reinvestigate the case. Investigators discovered female DNA from a bite mark on Rasmussen's body, and Stephanie Lazarus became the prime suspect. After the detectives were able to match Lazarus's DNA with the DNA found on Rasmussen's body, Lazarus was arrested for the murder on June 5, 2009. She was then allowed to retire early from the LAPD. She was held in the Los Angeles County Jail in place of $10 million bail. Stephanie Lazarus's murder trial began in early 2012. Prosecutors believed Lazarus's motive for the murder was jealousy over Sherry Rasmussen's relationship with her ex-boyfriend, John Ruetten. The prosecutor, Deputy District Attorney Shannon Presby, stated, "A bite, a bullet, a gun barrel, and a broken heart. That's the evidence that will prove to you that defendant Stephanie Lazarus murdered Sherry Rasmussen." Lazarus's attorney, Mark Overland, argued that the investigation into Rasmussen's death was botched from the beginning, and the evidence collected did not point to Lazarus as Rasmussen's killer. On March 8, 2012, Lazarus was convicted of Rasmussen's murder in the first degree. She was later sentenced in May 2012 to 27 years to life in prison, and she is currently serving her sentence at the Central California Women's Facility. She will be eligible for parole in 2039. Number 1, Daniel Saylor. Have you heard of the popular saying, "You would know your true friends in tough times"? It looked like Daniel took it a little seriously. Daniel Saylor, former Windermere police chief, refused to turn in records of the abuse case against a child under the guise of lost or misplaced, and went further to shut down the case, simply because his friend was the assaulter. Truly a good friend, but not just in the right situation. Turns out this is not the first time Bush, Saylor's friend, had perpetrated this act. The 2009 complaints were the second time a young woman claimed she had been molested by Bush. That accusation was also made by a different girl in 2003, and Saylor also stopped the investigation. Saylor was arrested on corruption charges, and his friend Scott Frederick Bush of Windermere was jailed on child assault charges that carry the potential of life in prison. After undergoing trial, Saylor was charged with 1 count of giving unlawful compensation for official behavior and 1 count of official misconduct. He was suspended without pay. Bush, Saylor's friend, on the other hand, was charged with capital violation of a person under 12 and pervertedly touching a person under 12 years of age. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.